Hello, Alex Lafkus here. I've been asked to kind of dig into a little bit deeper on hooking fish and how to hook more fish on streamers. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. There's really three main things that go into hooking more fish on streamers. And we're going to start at the very beginning, the hook. Now, you can sharpen whatever hooks you want and get them sharp enough. But really the key is thinner diameter. And I'm talking trout here. When you get to bass and other predators, they eat a little different than trout. Trout have a real tendency to nip at things. So I like lighter wire hooks. A lot of the hooks I'm using, some of the smaller size Arex trout predators are pretty good. The bigger sizes I don't like. So I go to that trout predator light, and that's a pretty standard streamer hook for me. Those only go up to a 2/0. So when we get past that, I'm using 3/0 and 4/0, which I use more 3/0 for trout. The 4/0 is turned into more of a bass hook, but I use the Gamakatsu round bend trebles, or not trebles, round bend worm hooks. They got the plastic worm keeper barbs on them, but you can mash those real easy. It's a really light wire hook. When I switched to this hook, I started hooking a lot more fish. Initially I was using the bigger B10S's, which I basically reserve for bass and whatever else, toothy predators, but not trout. I do use the B10S's a lot, especially, on some trailer hooks when I'm doing the little wiggle tail shank, but I don't go over a size 1. For trout, I do not like going over the size 1. 1s and 2s I use a ton of. 4 is good. It starts getting a little bit on the light side. Fine for a little trailer hook if you're 12 to 16 inches. But if I'm, in a zone where I'm thinking 4-pound fish or better, I don't really like the 4s. As far as a more traditional straight eye streamer hook, the best one I've found lately is the MFC wide gap streamer hook. I think these do only go up to 2/0, but this has got a little bigger gap. It's a lot lighter wire. If you watch some of my videos, you saw me lose a million fish on a 93, 95 Tiemco this year, which I threw away years ago because I was like, I missed too many fish on it. Then that was all I had. And then I dug around a little and found this hook, and this is going to be my hook instead of using that. So on jig flies, instead of using, most of the jig hooks I find are really heavy gauge. The best one I've found is a 90-degree jig hook. Because if I'm tying on a jig hook, I'm tying it to run upside down, hook point up rather, because I don't want it to snag. If you're doing anything else with a jig hook, the front hook gets really hard to hook fish on. If you're like, I know a lot of guys are in the trend of spinning deer hair heads on them to get that diving lip. Well, you got an issue here because now when you pull to set the hook, you're pulling down on the eye, which backs the hook up. Jig hooks are designed to go the other way. And the second you start mixing that up, you're going to have a harder time hooking fish. So I see a lot of fish on those type flies hooked on the rear hook. But as far as like my bass stuff goes, that 90-degree Gamakatsu hook is a little finer wire. I don't know how well you can see it there, but it's a little finer wire than a lot of the jig hooks on the market. So I've kind of picked up and become a fan of that. Now, that's the reason I don't buy a ton of flies too, because a lot of the flies you see on the market are too heavy a gauge of hooks for what I like. So I'm really particular about that. Also, you got to understand I'm guiding a lot. So a lot of times I'm not getting the cleanest hook sets or the cleanest casts, which lead to the clean hook sets. So I'm trying to just put all of the things I can control in my favor to catch those fish. So once we've got our fly picked with the right hook and tie it up or whatever you got to do, the other thing I think people don't notice as much as how important it is to make a good tight line cast. And that means your fly line is landing straight out there. We're avoiding the S curves. We're not mending. We're trying to keep that line as tight as possible. That makes sure your connection to that fly is as direct as possible so that when you pull, not only do you get a cleaner presentation because the fly is responding, but also you're going to get tension to your fish quicker on the hook set. Some of the biggest issues I see with people are turning the wrist in the cast. That gives you a little bigger belly. You want to draw that thumb straight behind your rod so that you're more straight to the fly. When people overpower sink tips, they have a tendency to really push it hard on the forward cast and it'll shoot all the way out, but it shocks a lot. So you want to actually just keep that even power back cast and forward cast so it lands out nice and straight and smooth, straight line. So, that involves slowing down. Not only your forward cast, but your back cast. If you're rushing your back cast, a lot of times you're shooting a lot of slop out there as well. So anytime you have more bends in your line, the longer it takes for you to get contact to the fly to where your hook set is more effective. Your strip set is also very important. Now, a strip set can be looked at a lot of different ways. I see a lot of strip rip. That will work in tiny rivers where you don't have a lot of slack out there, or it's a close proximity hook set. What you find on bigger rivers and lakes, a ton. Lakes are very difficult. When you're bass fishing, pike, whatever, those fish have a tendency to come at you. So you have to get your line tight by stripping a ton before you can go to the rod to use it. Now, the more slack you land out there in your cast, the more strips it takes to get tight. Sometimes the fish will spit it out in that time. Sometimes you get a half a strip with slack out there and you jerk the rod and you're never going to get enough tension to penetrate that fish's jaw. So you really want to focus on that cast and then your strip set. So if your cast is straight and you strip and you feel that belly leave the line, that's when you can go to the rod. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 strips. If the fish keeps coming at you after the bite, you got to strip till you feel tension, then lean into the rod. And it's not like a big jerk. It's just lean in and finish it off and keep stripping towards them. Saltwater's going to be different because those fish take the fight to you. You pin them, bang, they got it, they're running. Trout are different. They have a tendency to eat and kind of fold your way. So you've got to keep stripping on them and keep the bend in the rod to keep that pressure. What also goes into that is keeping that rod low. If you set into a fish and come up with it, you're taking away the belly that was already formed in your line. So that actually is creating slack. It's like there's some spay fishermen out here. And if you're spay fishing, do you ever jerk the rod upstream? Do you ever come up with it? No, you have a tendency to go with the belly to keep it tighter there. Anytime you adjust that rod left, up, anything else, or not left necessarily, but opposite side to where your rod is going, you're actually giving slack to that fish, which is going to cost you fish. So you want to keep that rod angle low, strip on them, strip on them, strip on them. Now, if you're in a boat, you want to always try to land that fish on the opposite side of the boat that it's hooked on. That ensures that you're keeping that belly tight and that rod swinging over the bow of the boat. I've seen a million fish lost with people who cross over and try to do this with a fish or swing it to this side to fight the fish. Man, you're taking that belly, you're shooting slack into it, whether you know it or not, and that fish is getting an opportunity to get off. So you want to set, you want to drag it over, and we always say go to the other side of the boat, come over the bow, drag the fish over the bow. That's really what you need to focus on when you're fighting that fish after everything else is lined up. So these are pretty simple things, but they're all very critical. When you're fishing for a fish that you might get to bite once or twice a season, if you're looking for that one fish, those are the things you need to do to ensure that fish ends up in the boat versus just something you think about all winter. So hopefully that stuff helped. Comments, questions, feel free to follow up down below. I'm going to provide some links to some of these hooks that I like down in the description so you can kind of take a look at them. And subscribe. I'm going to try to stay at this stuff as long as I can. We got 20 inches of snow, hoping to get out and do some more fishing. We'll just have to see. So thank you.